So this is the Blue Collar Creative Podcast, and kind of our mission is to talk to people who are, in blue collar industries, like in the trades, in construction, in agriculture, those kind of things, automotive, and just get their opinion on certain things, on where the industry's going, hear their story on how they got to where they're at now, and we're just excited to have you on, Ian.
Awesome.
Yeah.
I'm excited to be here.
Yeah, it's good to have you.
It's been a long time in the making.
So we were just out at CAF with Talk, which the Construction Advancement Forum, and we got to just connect up there, interact with a lot of people in the industry when it comes to the union side of things and moving forward and collaborating, having a lot of conversations and a lot of discussions.
Yeah. It's an intense group.
Sometimes it gets a little sticky.
That's all right. Yeah. It's sometimes you have to have the hard conversations, right, to get to the meat.
Yeah, but thanks for coming on here this morning, and
For
next
sure.
day after that, following up. It's nice to have you.
For sure. And congratulations on launch of Blue Collar Creative.
Thank you. Yeah, we're finally there. So now the real work starts, right?
Yeah, that's right. Awesome.
Yeah, so I guess, just for people who may not know, could you just give us your background, kind of how you started, how you got to where you're at now, and what you do?
Sure. Actually, so I'll explain the shirt I'm wearing, because I know it's kind of weird. I'm wearing somebody else's name on my chest, but Clive was actually my grandfather's name, and so I grew up on my grandfather's dairy farm when I was a kid. Not very many dairy farms out there.
Yeah.
He was adopted twice in the 1930s and ended up getting adopted by a set of teachers who couldn't have their own kids in Omaha. And they bought this farm from their family, basically to keep him and his brother from having to get enlisted in World War II. Because if you were the kids working on the farm, you didn't have to get conscripted, and you didn't have to go and fight in the war. So his father passed away when he was 15. His brother went ahead and joined up anyways, went to World War II. So he ended up inheriting the farm, not being able to go travel or go to college, which he was a little salty about, but he was a good Christian man, so he didn't distress that too much, right? Didn't show his displeasure all the time, but he was a little salty.
He would have liked to go?
Oh yeah. So
what do you think he would have gone for?
He wanted to do geology, actually.
Okay.
Yep. So like our kitchen table was stacked. I mean, literally stacked, probably 2 feet tall, with National Geographics and Discoveries and all that stuff all the time. So that's the way we got to travel the world. So that was cool.
Yeah.
Is there parts of like his story and I guess that tie into like who you are today? I mean, you're wearing the shirt, so I guess to some degree it seems like he had a pretty big influence on you.
For sure. Whew. A little touchy.
Yeah. I mean, we're getting right into
it. Got deep quick. Wow. Yikes.
Just going right for it.
No, I equate it to like farmers do everything, right? You're building on the farm, you're doing construction constantly, you got big heavy equipment moving out there, everything's super dangerous. Like, people got killed all the time, so it was nerve-wracking, but at the same time super rewarding. So It was really cool. And when I got into construction eventually, I always teased all my friends. I was like, this is farming light. You guys are nothing.
Yeah.
Like, we woke up on the farm at 2 a.m. when the cows got out. Like, we're working by 5 a.m. We're working till 7, 8, 9 p.m. every day, right? Like, you lived where you work, you ate where you worked. If you were lucky, you had kids where you worked. Like, you just, work was life was work. Like, there was no separation.
Yeah.
So that's why you see a lot of farm kids going to construction, because they're like, oh man, this is easy.
Yeah, in comparison.
I can do this.
What do you think, just thinking on that diversity of all the different things you'd have to do in a day on a farm, like you said, the construction, but then there's the farming, there's taking care of animals, there's all kinds of stuff.
Right.
How do you think that lent itself to just building character for you?
Yeah, I think it's like a farm is a mini corporation, right? Like, they're doing everything. You got insurance requirements, you're buying property, you're looking at investments all the time, you're trying to figure out, okay, if I buy these 10 calves, right, this year, will that equate to making money next year? You got weather issues that are always coming in there, and, whatever, you get a hailstorm, it wipes out your entire crops for, the entire year. That was all revenue you thought you were going to have, and then you got to figure out how to allocate that to other machinery, and how do you keep things on the roads, your mechanics, and you're doing construction on your own. I mean, it's intense. Like, it's a mini corporation. People don't realize how intense it is, I think.
Yeah, that's something that we've learned through what we call farm tubing now, because we're on the video production side, right?
Farm
So
tubing.
farm tubing. Very, we've laughed about this term, but it's a real term, and it's one way for farms to, you know, to some degree stay viable too, especially the smaller farms that they kind of take you along for the journey. You get to look into the lives that they're living,
Right.
And yeah, like just everything you said. For me, the economics of a farm just never seem to add up.
Right.
It's just like, how in the world do you stay doing this year after year after year?
Yeah.
Hardest workers on the planet, in my
for
mind.
sure. Yeah. And when I was 19, he gave me the opportunity to take over the farm. And I'm like, thanks, Grandpa, but no, thank you. Yeah. he always, the statement is you're land rich but dirt poor, right? All the time. So you may have a ton of money in property. You got, I think we had average like 400 to 500 acres, which is not a big farm, but running 50 to 80 head of cattle, that's every year. There's some serious money wrapped up in that. But he's driving a 1968 truck in the 1980s, and our trucks were from the 1950s for our grain trucks. And he bought 2 combines at auctions because one was for parts and the other one was try to keep moving. And nothing was brand new out there. So it was an interesting way to live.
Well, how'd you? We've covered the farm. How'd you end up where you're at now?
Yeah, so it's kind of a weird transition. When I was in high school, we ended up buying a house that was built by an architect, and I was like, oh, awesome. Architects get to design and build their own houses. That's phenomenal. That's what I want to do. I want to go build my own house. And so I went to college to be an architect, got a bunch of scholarships. They said, hey, with your background, your aptitude, we think you should go into architectural engineering. I'm like, cool, let's do that. Let's get scholarships. I'll do whatever. So I get into school, and they're like, you're going to be designing ductwork and piping systems for the rest of your life. I'm like, no, I'm not.
Not what I signed up for.
Yeah, that doesn't sound like fun at all. So switched out to architecture, got in there maybe like 2 years later. I'm like, okay, well, when are we going to talk about budgets and constructability? Like, how do you actually put these things together? And the guy just looked at me and like, you're in the wrong program, kid. I'm like, you picked the wrong program. Yeah. Like, okay, so now what do I do? And I had this awesome mentor over at school, Mike Swan. So he was the associate dean at the time, and he took me under his wing. He's like, okay, here's what we do. We're going to have this brand new program called Architecture Studies. It's kind of like Architecture Light, so you don't lose all the credits that you already had, and you can keep that, but you can dual major. And so I went to the business school, dual majored in business and architecture, and then right after that, he started up an architectural management program that was night school. So I was working for a big custom home builder out in north central Kansas, and that was in Lawrence, Kansas. I mean, he's building $1 million houses in the mid 90s, early 90s. I mean, $1 million house back then it's a big freaking house, right? Yeah. So I learned a lot from those guys, and then ended up going to commercial construction right before I went to my master's program. And so I used that master's program to kind of guide my career there. So learned a ton, but it was a hard bid GC in Kansas City, non-union. We had to set up two entrances on every job because we'd have one. We guaranteed we're going to have a strike in Kansas City, so we'd have to have one entrance that people could cross, and the other ones that they could picket. And, we had hard bid subcontractors on every job, so needless to say, it was kind of a shit show most of the times. I think we ended up taking over probably 6 other companies while I was there because they would just go belly up. It's like they'd take one letter. Hey, you missed this on the bid. Your total bid was $10 million. You missed like $2 million on your bid. So you either give us your company or we're going to sue you for the rest of your life. So learned a lot that way. It was that was intense. I didn't enjoy it. Like, that was not why I got into construction. I wanted to go build stuff. Right? I don't want to push paper and sue people and put them out of business. It was no fun. So we tried to move out to Colorado. My wife and I were both finished our master's programs. We're like, okay, we can move anywhere in the world. Where do we want to go? So we started going through all the books and all the research. Like, what's the top 10? Best air quality, best quality of life, best water quality, blah, blah, blah. And Colorado kept popping up in the top 10, like, consistently. So, like, all right, well, we're already going out there hiking in the summer and skiing in the winter. So it's 8 hours from home. You can get back if you need to. So we moved out there, or tried to move out there before September 11th. I had a ton of interviews set up right after September 11th. September 11th happened. They called me up like, hey, we're going to be lucky if we keep the staff we've got. So, give us a call in a couple of years when you come back. got a call from some of my buddies over at J.E. Dunn about 9 months later. They'd bought some companies during the recession because everybody took a nosedive. So they went in and cleaned house and picked up a couple companies out there in Colorado, and they asked me to come out and help them start those companies up and take over a couple jobs they inherited out there. So funny thing was, I left Kansas City with a hard bid general contractor. It was about $50 to $60 million a year. Went to Colorado Springs, where they had bought a hard bid general contractor. It was about $50,000 to $60,000 a year. So I went right from one company to the other company, which subcontractors going out of business. We underbid them. Like, I was literally just like pulling my hair out, working 80 hours a week. Just there was nothing you could do. Like everything, you're already underwater, right? So you're just like swimming to try to get your nose above water. And I hated my life. It was terrible, and I wasn't doing anything. I wasn't building anything. Like, my hands were idle. I could type really well, but nobody wants to do that for a living. Well, sorry. Some people want to do that for a living, but I did not want to do that for a living. That was not me. But so I went out to the field a couple times, and I'm in my dress whites and fancy clothes, being the project manager and all that stuff. And my senior PM would be out there, and he watched me. I would just like go over and start picking up stuff and moving stuff with the guys. And he's like, I think you need to go out in the field. I'm like, cool, let's do that, because I want to shoot myself in the head. Like, it was bad. Like, hated life. And so with J. Dunn, they actually had a program where you could join the apprenticeship program. So as their superintendent trainee program, they wanted you to go get a full apprenticeship. Didn't matter how many degrees you had, they didn't care. They just wanted you to go. So they had me join the Carpenters Union, started at literally like 0 on the apprenticeship. The first week I go in there and they're having us add fractions, right? Because, how do you read a tape measure? I'm like, you got to be kidding me. Why am I sitting here adding fractions? But as I was in there, I'm getting paid for a week to be in class. I'm grabbing videos and books and just, studying as much as I possibly can. Got to meet all the instructors and just loved it. It was phenomenal because, these guys got out of the business so they could teach. It was phenomenal to see their passion. Sorry, I got a frog in my throat here. So,
thanks for sharing all that, Ian. Just kind of taking us through the history. What year was that, though? Like when you made that transition?
Moved out to Colorado in 2002. So this would be about 2004, almost 2005ish, somewhere in that range.
And just at that point, so you're kind of in that corporate sort of type in a way for a couple years.
About 4.5, 5 years as a PM in the office, in an office like this with much worse lighting and terrible computers, and my eyesight literally went from like 20/20 to I couldn't see you. I couldn't even like focus on your face because it was, my eyes were getting destroyed by the terrible fluorescent lights and no daylight all day long for 10, 12, 14 hours a day. It was not a good, so not a fun time.
3-4 years or so like that, and then you finally got back in the field, but you kind of had to start from the training and the education and the knowledge, like where you're getting books and videos and take us, I guess, through that.
And I'd worked in the trades. I took a job when I was 17 in high school doing residential foundations, and the main reason I took it was like $8 an hour. I was like, holy crap! And that was when I think minimum wage like $3.75 or $4.25 or something like that. Like, so I was making big money, man. I was killing it.
I love it.
Killing it. And but it was hard work. It was 8-foot Simons, 9-foot Simon panels. We didn't have a load truck, right? You had to throw everything up over your shoulders, up out of the pit, all on your own. But I came out of there. I didn't have to work out, right? It was just, you got to work out all day, every day, which was phenomenal. And I think that's one of the things that attracts a lot of people to construction. Like, you'll get to be physical. You can go run up the stairs all day long. Nobody's going to tell you not to go run up the stairs and go take the elevator. So you got to work out all the time, and it was awesome. And I did that over the summers while I was in college to pay for college, because I could make enough money over 3 months to basically get me through about 9 months of school, and I'd have to work a little bit other jobs there to.
Is that
to
even
make
possible now?
No way. No, absolutely not. No. I got so lucky. I think
that's amazing.
I stayed in state, so I went to KU. I think it was like $1,500 a semester back then.
Wow.
And it was like one of the top 10 most affordable schools in the country at that point in time. I didn't know any of that. It just happened to get lucky at that point in time. But so I worked in the trades, and then you go through college, so they focus you in the office. They think you're going to be in the office, and I just hated it. So I wanted to go to the field. Did the apprenticeship program, and I remember that first week I got to work at 6:30. you get ready, you do your stretch and fletch, you do all that stuff. You start work at 7 o'clock. You start breaking down at 3:15. You're in your car by 3:35.
Yeah.
And I got home. I'm like, crap. What am I going to do for the next 8 hours? This was phenomenal. Like, I was just awesome. So I start gutting my house and remodeling the house, and you go and you meet all your guys, all your buddies that are doing whatever, plumbing, electrical, landscaping, and so you just all of a sudden you have no fear whatsoever. You're just like, yeah, I can tear out that wall, no problem.
Let's do it.
Put that back later, it'll be fine.
It'll happen.
Which my wife was, much to her chagrin, because I just took on all sorts of remodeling projects at that point in time. And
How many of them did you finish? Got them all done?
All of them, yeah. I've got one house now that's been like 16 years in the making. I think I've got a phase 6 that we haven't gotten to yet, but
Okay.
I had it all planned out and sequenced. I had my charts and my Gantt charts and schedules and
Doing it the right
values.
way.
Oh yeah.
Well, that PM background was kind of coming into play.
Oh, yeah.
In some ways.
The organizational structure is definitely handy to have. But
Yeah.
So a lot of from that story, a lot of what we promote, with what we're trying to do, is advocating for those people who work with their hands and who get down and do the work and who value hard work. And it sounds like there was something when you were in the office, you were in that corporate environment, there was something that drew you to working with your hands, getting back into the field. And what do you think that was?
Honestly, I equate it back to going and working on the farm. Like, it just is what you did as a kid. It's kind of what you knew at that point in time. There's a little cerebral thing, like, but we saved that for night. That was kind of like you studied at night and then you went and worked with your hands during the day. Mm. So I don't know. I think that was, and there's something very satisfying for me able to build something, right? Like, I can walk by buildings like, oh yeah, I spent 2.5 years. I helped build that. Like, I remember pouring that concrete stair pad. I remember pouring that foundation. I remember hanging off, 80 feet in the air, and there's nothing else around you except for you're strapped to a piece of rebar up there while you're pouring concrete. And it was just cool. It was just super cool to see that, and gave you some serious satisfaction.
Yeah. I guess what would you say to someone, and I know you do this quite a bit. You do a lot of education, so you sit in a lot of classrooms now teaching, right? And for hours and hours, you've been down in Ann Arbor with the ironworkers. So I just, from what is like that one thing you would say to someone who feels like they're just trying to find their way in life, but loves that. They love working with their hands, producing.
Yeah, I mean, I think everybody thinks it's mutually exclusive. Like, you either work in the field or you work in the office. Like, you either do a job where you're reading all day, or you're doing a job where you're working with your hands. And in my mind, I don't think it's mutually exclusive. You get to do both. Like, you may have to do one for a little time period, and if that doesn't really tickle everything that you're trying to do in life, then take night classes or take some online classes. I think people are kind of selling themselves a little bit short when, I think the tide's kind of turning right now, where not everybody knows that they have to go to college anymore. Before, that was driven. It was like 95% of people had to go to college. I think people are starting to understand that you don't have to go to college, but you can still go to college if you want to. And if you're, worried about the perception and not having that diploma or degree program, then go to night school, man. Like, all the employers are willing to pay for that, and if you have the initiative, then people will gravitate to you and help make that happen. So,
that's an interesting follow up from that. It's like, as someone who has, saying not everybody has to go to college, as someone who has a master's, like, what is, from your experience, how has that helped you? Yeah, how has that helped you?
I think it's kind of given me a broader perspective. Like, I don't look down on people that don't have degrees, and I don't look down on people who have PhDs. I'd say that some of the PhDs are a little harder to talk to, but no, it's I've got friends on both sides of the aisle, and it's hard work that makes things happen. So you can go either direction, or you can do both, and as long as you're trying to make good things happen for lots of people, then I'm on your team.
Yeah. And that's it. You talked about like where it's going and what people are doing now. I guess that'd be an interesting segue into more of like your take on where the future of this industry is when it comes to construction, technology, all of that. I'm just really curious to hear your thoughts on.
Yeah, so I guess I didn't introduce myself, so maybe I should do that.
How far are we in?
That's fine. So I head up our workforce development efforts at Trimble, and so we're a technology company that focuses on a lot of industries that aren't typically technology adept. They're getting more so that way now, but when I started with them 11 years ago, construction was technology was kind of a dirty term. Most of the folks out there did not want to have anything to do with it. Maybe Nextel's push to talk was pretty ingenious back then, but other than that, nobody really wanted to take on technology. And so with my background, as soon as I came on board, we helped start up our buildings division. So basically everything from design to engineering to construction and then operations. And I thought it was just a phenomenal, concept to be able to put all those things together. I can actually digitize my design at the beginning. I can digitize my estimate. I can have that flow into my construction documents and my actual budgets while I'm going through there. And then I can use laser scanners and total stations and mixed reality and GNSS and GPS and all this stuff to go make sure I can get it like literally down to a gnat's ass. And that's kind of how I gravitated towards Trimble. We got the opportunity to build their headquarters when I was at J.E. Dunn, and I was the on-site tech manager, and I had to sign all sorts of NDAs and got to play with all their stuff in the background. And I think that's what people don't realize is a lot of this stuff takes 8 to 10 to 15 years to kick out the door. So some of the stuff we were working on 8 years ago is like finally coming out the door now, right? So seeing what that was in the background when they approached me and said, "Hey, would you like to work here?" I'm like, hell yeah, I want to work here, man. That looks like fun. Like I get to go play with things and test robots and try to break them. That was my favorite thing to do. It's a big thing in construction. Like constructing things is really fun, but demo is awesome.
It is.
Yeah, it's really easy to demo though. It's really hard
is.
to put it back together.
Yep.
The devil's in the details.
Right.
But yeah, sorry, I went a long way around that.
I love it. I mean, anytime Trimble shows up to an event, they bring the robots too.
Always love that.
Yeah, you got to have something tactile. I mean, kids,
very cool.
Kids like software, but they really love robots.
Yeah,
for sure.
So there's nothing better.
And there's more of them coming too.
Oh yeah. There's all sorts of robots coming.
Trimble Dimensions is coming out.
Yeah, that's gonna be huge. November 11th through 13th out in Las Vegas, and we've combined a bunch of different events. So they call this one Dimensions Plus because we'll have an off-site where we teamed up with the Operators Union. We're renting 100 acres from those folks. We'll have probably somewhere between 80 to 100 different machines, all outfitted with some level of machine control on there, including like some underwater sonar and other devices there to help with dredging and underwater excavations and operations. They've also got SketchUp Basecamp that's going to be out there, which if your listeners don't know anything about SketchUp, it's a phenomenal 3D program. Free for anybody K through 12, and then they've got great education programs available too. But we used it at J. Dunn all the time. When I was proposing on projects, we'd go and actually design the entire project in SketchUp. We'd be able to grab a Google Earth image, drop that in, go in and grab a D6 dozer, from the warehouse, drop that into your model, grab a tower crane, we had our own little warehouse of J-Dunn trucks and J-Dunn Connexes and portalettes and, anything you could think of. And we literally just sit there and it's like roadblocks for adults. You go and design your project exactly how it's going to be built up and then show where the excavation's going to go in April and where the foundations are going to go in May, and then start seeing it go floor 1 and 2 and 3, and you could show the 4D sequence. And we walked in their proposals and press play, like the owners just sit there and their jaws would drop. We're like, oh shit, that's what my job's going to look like.
Yeah. Wow.
And then somebody else would come in there and go through their Gantt chart of where they're going to be and bore them to death. And next thing you know, we get the job. And
that's awesome.
That's how we got the Trimble job. So
wow.
Yeah, that was cool.
That is awesome.
So yeah, when I got there, I basically concentrated on how do we get this into colleges? How do we get this into unique training programs? Like, let's get this to the people who really the boots in the ground, because that's how I came up in my career. As soon as I got that controller in my hand, I knew more about that job than anybody else on that entire project, including the engineers, architects, owners. Like, I knew more than my superintendent, right? And I was fresh kind of fresh kid on the block. And I'm sitting there, I'm like, hey, our plumbing line's going to come up right here in this wall, and I could point a laser to it and get within 1/16 of an inch. I'm like, it's right there. And that's why we're going to have problems with this beam. And I'm explaining that to the owners and the architects and engineers. And so,
Yeah.
really helps you get a really good grasp on the projects and how all these systems come together to make a whole building.
Yeah, that's intense. That's incredible.
Yeah, and information is, the technology side of construction. Like, information is so important, and just to like what you're saying there, to prevent like rework, things like that. Can you just kind of like talk through some of the implementations of technology and how that's changing things for the better?
Yeah, for sure. Before, I think there was the concept of the master builder, somebody that spent a lot of time not only drafting but architecture school, some engineering, and then they're working in the field the entire time. But like that was like less than 1%ers, right? Those are like the 0.001%. Nowadays, almost anybody can get to that level of detail, right? So if you're doing the digital model at the very beginning, and you don't have to get it completely constructible, but then you bring in your team of the experts on the mechanical, electrical, and structural, and civil side, and everybody else, you start making sure that entire project comes together dramatically better, right? Like before, it was you had a bunch of plans, and I've still got a light table in my office where I'd take my mechanical plan and overlay with my architectural plan, and I would look for where the pipes are coming up in the middle of a desk, right? Or I'd take first floor and stack it with second floor, and you'd see that the architect shifted things by 3 or 4 inches on accident, and so now my walls don't stack from floor to floor, which means my vent line's got a little jog on it, which means they're probably going to miss it, or it's not going to flow right, and so you just don't see that in 2D. Some people are able to kind of translate that, but again, it's like 1% of people are able to translate that physical plan into a 3D,
in their mind,
image in their mind.
To visualize that, it's super helpful.
Yeah, and you have to have experience to be able to visualize that. You had to break things to visualize that, right? You had to make a bunch of mistakes to be like, oh, don't do that.
Yeah.
Now you can literally just look at the 3D model, or I've got Trimble Connect AR on my phone. I can literally, if I had a 3D model of this place right now, I could get into the model, overlay it right on the wall, turn off the architectural layer, and see the mechanical, electrical, plumbing in the wall, or see where the ductwork is right above the ceiling. And, I don't have to guess or go through a stack of plans about 3 inches thick to figure that stuff out. So
that's awesome.
Makes a huge difference.
Yeah. Can we talk about the threats and opportunities that are coming?
Yeah, what do you think is like we kind of
SWOT analysis?
Yeah, we kind of thought it might be an interesting thing to do in a way. Yeah. Is like, what do you think is one of the biggest threats to the industry as a whole right now?
I don't know if it's a threat, but I think there's a lot of startup companies trying to solve the same problem that have already been solved. I mean, it's good to have startups, but it takes a lot of bandwidth away from the project teams. The teams don't have time to go test this stuff out. And I think you see a lot of contractors kind of setting up a technology team that their sole job is to go kick the tires on these new technologies. So technology doesn't solve everything. That's not my shtick, but it definitely makes a huge difference. But it's just hard to kind of get the wheat through the chaff, right? Like there's so much out there right now, and it's evolving so quickly. AI is going to be huge. It's going to make some fundamental changes on technology or on construction technology for sure. But how do you sift through all that, right? Like, how do I find the top 2, top 3, whatever, that are going to be, the best ones for my team, and then pick one eventually to implement? I think that takes a lot of time away. So I think that's
interesting.
I don't know if it's a threat, but it's definitely an opportunity.
Just to add like a follow-up as observation, that I don't know if you ever saw the banner on the side of this massive construction project that said ChatGPT didn't build this building, kind of thing, or can't do this.
Yeah, no, I think it was actually a prompt. Hey, ChatGPT, come build this building.
Come build this building. Yeah. And you're like, it still takes people, and I think the mentality around how to utilize technology as another tool in your tool belt, essentially, it's just, it can be a little intimidating for people who are like, hey, I want to work with my hands too. But also, you've done both. You kind of bridged the gap between someone who loves working with their hands, but also like embracing the technology side of it to make it tactile, to make it something that you can actually implement.
Yeah, and that's probably the biggest threat, is not having enough people to go actually build these projects. And I cover that in, like, when I go and present in front of colleges and a lot of the civil engineering, kids are out there, and architectural engineering and construction management programs. I'm like, hey, like, we have a serious problem. Like, if you look at kind of the natural disasters that are happening more frequently nowadays, we got man-made disasters. You look at Ukraine. I mean, we're destroying an entire country over there. We're going to have to rebuild, and that's 45 million people that are depending on that infrastructure. If you look at the projections for population growth, like I think it was 1950 had roughly about 2.5 billion. By 1980, we had like 5.5 billion. We're up to 8 billion right now, and I think by 2050 we're supposed to have like 10.5 billion or 10 billion, right? So if you just break that down, we're going to have 2.5 billion more people on this planet in the next 25 years. That means we're going to have to create all the infrastructure, all the cities, all the programs, education programs, schools, churches, right, hospitals, all that stuff for the same population we had in 1950 through the beginning of humanity.
Yeah.
Right? Like,
Wow.
Let that sink in a little bit. Like, all of humanity up to 1950, we have to recreate in the next 25 years.
Yeah, that's intense.
Yeah.
Wow.
It's intimidating.
Yeah. So, good news is we got jobs. We got lots of jobs. Bad news is, like, we have to figure this shit out real quick.
Yeah.
Right? Like, we have to not only make it super efficient, but it has to be resilient. Like, you don't have an opportunity to screw this up.
Yeah.
So
from a recruiting perspective, I mean, obviously you do a lot of, speaking and things like that in that exact vein. Kind of what is your message when you do that?
So I think my message is technology is the great equalizer, right? Like, we need people in construction. We need females. We need, minorities, underrepresented communities. We need kids to get interested in construction. I think a lot of kids aren't going and getting jobs anymore in high school. It's not really emphasized, but there's still jobs you can do when you're, up to 14, 15, 16 years old. Maybe it's not out in the field running equipment, right? Because insurance is not going to appreciate that. OSHA's not going to appreciate that. But there's definitely a way that they can get exposure to that. And there's programs like Skills USA and, I think the Home Builders Association, they've got some good programs that are going out there. And I think it's just an awareness that we need the parents to know about those programs and get them involved. And that's one of the ways I met Kaylee McCabe was she was working on all those programs and really focusing on the parents. Like, hey, we need your kids to know about this. Oh, by the way, if you want a good job too, you can come along and you can apply at the same company that we're going to try to get your kid employed at. Yeah. But yeah, that's I think that's a huge opportunity for us, is just getting kids interested in it. And I think one of the ways you can do that is like digital models and some of this hardware and the laser scanners and the robots, right? Like, it makes their mind start turning, the gears start turning. Like, oh, okay, I can go build my fort with that. Like, I can go dig a pool with that. Like, just these little projects you can start to get them into, and then hopefully that expands to being able to build hospitals and schools and housing. Yeah,
that's pretty cool. I've seen like a few pieces of technology that help do that. Like growing up, I think a lot of, like, even my nieces and nephews right now, they got like tablets and they're on them, too much, right?
Too much.
We'll have to. Sorry about this.
You're getting hot water.
Yeah, I'm getting hot water with the in-laws now. But to some degree, it's like, why? How can we get them out there doing things and creating things and like using their imaginations? Like, that's one of the big focuses for. I got 2 small boys now, and I want to see them explore those imaginations, not sitting in front of a TV,
Yeah.
And that's so easy for parents to just kind of fall into that mindset, because parenting can be hard, and it's hard work, you know, and everything good comes from hard work.
Yeah. And I'm guilty of it too. Like, just you get on your phone, you start looking at LinkedIn, you're like, oh, and then you look up and it's like an hour and a half later, like, oh no, what was I doing with my life?
Yeah, we can all fall into it, absolutely.
Yeah. So
just the next generation, how do we get them into those types of programs early? Like, I know Home Depot has like a really cool thing where you can take your kid to Home Depot and do something fun.
Take some classes.
When they're really young too. But then as you're getting further along, what are some of those opportunities that parents can take?
Yeah, I think you hit it on the head. We got to limit screen time for both the kids and the parents. So if they can both like carve out a few hours every day or on the weekends, like say, okay, from 10 a.m. until 4 p.m., we're not going to touch our phones. We're going to go do a house project, or we're going to go do a project with Habitat for Humanity or something like that, right? Like just getting away from the tablets, getting away from the screens, and going do this physical activity. And I think that'll help a lot with some of the health issues we got out there too, right? Just your eyes are going bad, which costs us more money. You're not getting up off the couch, which costs us more money and causes you health concerns. Like, let's just get out and go do something.
Let's be productive.
Yeah.
Well, continuing along that theme, what do you think is one of the biggest opportunities in the industry looking towards the future?
Yeah. So I'm kind of a sci-fi nerd. I love everything Star Trek and Star Wars and, everything. My wife just nerds out. She hates it. She just thinks I'm such a geek. She's like, which one was Darth Vader on again? I'm like, you gotta be kidding me. And she thought it was Dark Vader forever.
No.
Makes sense, but yeah.
Yep.
But, for the kids that are kind of in that sci-fi realm, there's a ton of money going right now from NASA and all the other countries. Like, how are we going to go colonize Moon? How are we going to go colonize Mars? How are we going to go colonize Titan? And I think it's coming really, really fast. So I think that's one of the biggest opportunities for humanity in general. Like, we're down here on a tiny little spaceship that is really susceptible to all sorts of issues. So if we want to keep all this knowledge that we've accumulated over the last 100,000 years, like, we really need to get off this planet and kind of expand our universe. So I think that's one of the biggest opportunities. In the meantime,
yeah, because that's an interesting perspective.
I don't think we're that far off. I think it's
Okay.
I think it's coming faster than anybody really thinks. But in the meantime, we have to figure out, how do we do all that remotely? Like, if I'm going to go colonize Mars, it means I got to send equipment. I got to go figure out how to mine it. I got to have to figure out how to use in-place regolith to actually, create structures or tunnel down to get below soils and protect ourselves from the solar radiation and so forth. But how do we do that mining? How do we do that in-place construction? How do we do the automation of the equipment? How do we do the planning? Right? Like, it all comes back to that digital twin and automating the equipment, automating the processes, and then automating the testing and infrastructure that way.
Yeah.
So we need to do that right now for all sorts of military applications, for all sorts of societies. If your area is highly susceptible to a hurricane, then you probably want to do a lot of that remotely at this point in time. So I think we need to work on perfecting that. But you can't do everything with robots, right? It's just not feasible for us right now. It's a little too cost prohibitive. I think there's opportunities there, but in the meantime, we still have to figure out how to do it with our hands.
Continue to figure out how to do it.
Yeah, and there's a huge opportunity, I think, for education in general. You see some money getting allocated to CTE programs, career technical education programs, and those are getting a little more traction right now, depending on which state you're in, which school district you're in, if they pass the bond issue. But I think from a global and kind of national perspective, we need to push more money into that Department of Education and continuing education and broadening the perspective beyond just STEM. But we also need some hands-on technical career education going in, not just high schools, but going into junior highs and, a little bit in through that K through 5 and K through 6 as well.
Yeah. I would love that. I mean, to some degree, right? We've talked about raising boys and how, like, those first few years in, like, school, sitting still at a desk, it's just...
It's not made for kids. It's not made for boys, especially. It's just one of those things that it's kind of soul sucking, and it's just boys were made to play with their hands and their energy and imagination and
girls.
And girls. You're right.
Yeah, no,
absolutely.
There's
we have 2 boys each, so we're in that world. But
I think it's one of those things that there's a lot of things about, especially early on in the education system, that are just not conducive to that. Taking that next step towards, like, doing something with your hands or a technical because it just feels like it's so regimented to this one thing.
Right. Yeah.
You can see them come alive when you give them a project to do. It's like a task to do a job, and like even at 2 years old, it's like, I'm gonna help mom do that. I'm gonna help dad. I'm gonna help dad mow. I'm gonna help. It's just like they love those sort of things. So it's like how to keep doing that more than screen time and TV and all that, what we talked about.
Yeah, I like those little mini tool sets.
Yeah.
Right? Like, not the ones that are all plastic that they're sitting there hammering stuff, but, like, give them a real drill. I mean, I think we were just talking to a bunch of folks from Milwaukee yesterday, and they have done a phenomenal job over the last 5 years of getting into like Skills USA and all these different programs and donating tools to the kids. And I was just talking to somebody, I can't remember who it was yesterday, but they were saying, my little boy, he was like 3 years old, and he would just screw screws into a board in and out all day, like for hours. Just loved it. And I was like, oh, well, that's gonna be a carpenter. And it's awesome. And when I was growing up on that farm, so my grandfather's grandfather, my great grandfather, he was a shop teacher in Omaha. So we had this shop, and it was like, if anybody walked in there nowadays, it was just like, la. Yeah. We had a kiln in there. We could actually like fire stuff. We had, I think there was probably 20 different crates of 20 different types of sandpaper, like full crates. Every sandpaper we had, every tan tool you could ever think of, woodworking tools, metalworking tools. And I'm like 4 or 5 years old. My grandpa's out, he's in the field, so I'd walk in that shop and just grab stuff and start screwing into wood, drilling stuff and sanding stuff. Yep. I think I cut out a few boards of our barn that I wasn't supposed to cut out, but I mean, you
cast them up later.
That's right. Yeah, you learn how to fix that stuff later.
Yeah, that's awesome.
Don't be afraid to break stuff. I think that's kind of fundamental tool. Yeah, you can always fix it.
Yeah, I think that's a really important tip to anyone, because we talk to people who are starting out in their filmmaking career, for example, for what we do, and it feels like so many people are waiting for permission to do something, to be like, oh, I can't do that unless somebody says I'm good at it, or like somebody says it's okay to do that. It's like, don't be afraid to break stuff. Don't be afraid to take chances. Don't be afraid to try something new. You're probably going to be bad at it, but so is everyone for the most part. Like if somebody, it's like that 1% of 1% who jumps into something first time and is like, they're great at it. That's so rare. Like everybody screws up, and it's just, you can't be afraid, and you can't wait for somebody to say, hey, here's your permission to try something new.
Right. Yeah. There are very few savants, but there are a lot of experts out there, and they became experts by doing things the wrong way or breaking things, or it didn't quite work the first time. I mean, that's science, right? Like science is, I make a hypothesis, I go test it. If it doesn't work, I either got my answer or I try again with a new set of parameters, right?
Yeah, you learn something despite the outcome.
It's the same thing as construction. We just don't think of construction as science, but it is. That's what we're doing. We're making these construction projects science projects. I think you'll see the firms that kind of approach it that way, they rise to the top real quick. And I think those are also the firms that have these like technology testing divisions, right? So they're out there kind of treating this like a science project. Like, how are we going to get the data to make this better? How do we get that data back in so it informs our next project and we can improve, right? Rob Painter's our CEO over at Trimble, and his favorite saying is just 1% better. Like, just every day try to do 1% better. And, time escalation
across the board. If you add that up over a long period. I mean, we were recently out shooting with some engineers at Chevy, and they work on the race cars.
Oh yeah.
And they've gotten it so good to the point where they're just looking for like 0.001 better.
Right.
At this point, because it's just like that is the difference between winning and losing for them on the track.
Yep.
But it's just really interesting. It's like, we're not getting whole seconds out of this, but they're running test after test after test after test. It's just trying to get that little bit extra.
Right.
And that's just this pursuit, I think, as humans, that is like, you want to continue to progress. One of the main reasons why somebody leaves a job at this point too is, outside of maybe the money these days, which is I think more of a something that people are considering because of where the economy's at. But outside of that, it's learning. Like, if I'm not learning, I'm not growing, then I've got to find something new. Because I think we're just bent towards that as humans. We want to continue to learn and grow.
100%. Yeah. I think that's the famous saying is, you don't quit a company, you quit a manager. So the managers that really emphasize, hey, I want you to go get this extra credential, or here's some things that I want you to explore, or hey, what do you want to learn? Like, what are your favorite hobbies? What are your favorite topics? How do we tie that into your job? And the people that do that, like, you see those people rise up real quick. So
that's a good reminder as bosses. So
well, hopefully nobody's quitting us. But.
Well, you can't quit me.
Well, thanks a lot, Ian. I think we're out of time here. We don't want to take up too much of your time, and just super excited to have you on, have this conversation, and it's been great.
No, that's awesome. Thanks for having me. I'm excited to see what you guys do here. BCC,
Blue Collar Creative. Let's go. No, thanks, Ian. Thanks.
Yeah, thanks a lot.
Thanks for coming on.
Awesome. Thanks, guys. Appreciate it.
I don't think he finished the story.
Probably not.
And everybody on the podcast is like, "Come on, why didn't you just ask the phone?" So
yeah. So I found this shirt. I was down in Austin, Texas, walking around by myself, and I walked by this row of bars and restaurants, and I see Clive, my grandfather's name, up on the board. I'm like, oh, I got to go in there. I got to go see what this place is. And it's this cute little kind of whiskey bar. And so I go up there and I look behind the bar, and they've got this shirt, and it's got a buffalo on it, which my grandfather's farm was Buffalo Creek Farms. So
No way.
I was like, oh, I got to get the shirt. I got to get the shirt. So it was phenomenal. Yeah.
And I guess just the influence that he had on you, like you talked about that from just a career standpoint, wanting to work with your hands, and the things that he did really inspired you. I guess how else did he like just play a role in who you are today?
Ooh, okay. Big drink of water on that one. Yeah, continual education. Like that was his big thing. He's like, he went through the Depression, lived through World War II, and his big thing was.
Sorry. No, you're good. Take your time.
Damn. We had to take a break.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Sorry.
No, and we can cut this too. But I think those people in our life, every time we get onto a job site and we're talking to someone who has won an award of some kind, and they're standing up there. Just recently, we got out onto a job site with ASCO, and I got to talk to the award winner, Doug. Mm-hmm. And older guy, but I just asked him like, who have been the people who have influenced you, and just to see him, just well up with emotion around that. It's probably one of the, like, even just me thinking about that gives me chills thinking about who's played a role in influencing my life. But I guess just from
and he always said the one thing they can't take away from you is what's in your brain. So
yeah,
education.
Yeah,
it's awesome. Thanks, Ian.
Yeah.
No, thanks for sharing that. Thanks for going deep.